We will begin now, sir. So basically here we are trying to see where these terms have been used, lack of credibility, where the term lack of credibility was used in the American and Israeli media. We see this from Foreign Policy magazine about the status of Israel around the world, and therefore there's this lack of credibility against Israel, specifically in Washington. And even inside of Israel, the political and social divisions in Israel have become more clear. Have become clearer, and therefore they're talking about new difficulties in the next new stages. It is impossible to destroy Hamas, and Hamas might even grow even more in Gaza. They're talking about 250,000 Israeli people living outside of their houses, so they've been displaced. And so to retain the trust and the confidence, Israel must defeat Hamas and Hezbollah, but that is impossible. There might be a potential catastrophe. This might be a potential catastrophe for Israel. This is what foreign policy is saying. So if an all-out war is happening with Hezbollah, then this could be the fate of Israel. So we're talking about major divisions inside of Israel. And here I want to salute you, Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos from London. Dr. Marcus, and given the lack of credibility in the security institution of Israel, upon which Israel was built, we're talking also about discrediting the political leadership, which is in the eye of the storm, specifically in the character of Benjamin Netanyahu. And one of the most important things that what our colleague said was about the future of Zionism and how Zionism harnessed and employed the United States of America in order to achieve the goals of Israel. How can we understand the significance and the consequences of this lack of credibility concerning what is happening in this war and the details of all of these facts and guides?
Suffice to say that all is not going well for Israel's war against the Palestinian people in Gaza. It is abundantly clear that in military terms, political terms, and social terms, there are major problems concerning Israel's war in Gaza. Militarily, the Israeli Defense Force is incurring very serious losses in men and in armour. In political terms, this war of aggression by Israel has polarised Israeli society. Yes, on the one hand, there are many Israeli civilians who support the Israeli government's war in Gaza. But on the other hand, there is a significant amount of Israelis who oppose the war, and they oppose the war for a number of reasons. And then when we talk in social terms, more and more Israeli civilians are becoming aware of how the IDF has deliberately targeted Palestinian men, women and children in Gaza. Now, that is a reality which, of course, Western mainstream media will not report on, but it is the case that if you sample social media such as Facebook and X, formerly known as Twitter, you will see a lot of Israeli civilians expressing disgust and horror at what their government and at what their military is doing to ordinary Palestinians in Gaza. Now, when we talk about the Netanyahu factor, this is a very significant one. Netanyahu has long been, at best, a controversial politician, and at worst, he is one of the most heinous of war criminals in contemporary times. And it is clear also that Netanyahu is not getting what he wants in Gaza. He's not getting what he wants in Gaza on the battlefield, but also because of the murderous policies he has implemented in Gaza, because of the murderous instructions, orders he has given to the IDF in Gaza. There are vast amounts of people in the world who, previous to this onslaught, knew very little about what has been going on between the Israelis and the Palestinians. But because of Netanyahu's horrific role in this war, many people in all four corners of the world are now aware of the genocide that Israel is perpetrating against the Palestinian people, and has been perpetrating against the Palestinian people since 1948. And that is on a large account due to Netanyahu. So again, the Netanyahu factor is very significant, and it is detrimental to Israel's war in Gaza.
Dr. Marcus, sorry for interrupting you, but is Netanyahu the primary factor in what is happening and what happened on October 7th? Because the Le Monde Afrique, the French magazine, the French newspaper, said that the future of Zionism is in danger because according to the statistics and surveys, and according to Israeli experts, as the assault on October 7th began, and after October 7th, the assault of Israel, the Zionism has lost in significance and influence, specifically the religious ones, and we see that NATO and the United States want Benny Gantz in order to face the extremist religious side of the government. So we are talking about the future of Zionism and this religious structure of Zionism and all of the dangers it has.
I don't believe that Zionism per se is in danger at present. Again, a great many people in the world, especially in the Western world, are now aware of the dangers of Zionism, of the apartheid, racist nature of Zionism. That is true. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Western governments, be it the American government or the British government, will loosen their support for Israel. We do not know at present what Israel, Netanyahu's objective in Gaza is. It is still very early days. When the Israelis say they intend to defeat Hamas, what does that mean exactly? That they arrest all of the leadership of Hamas and kill every single fighter? Well, theoretically, they could do that. And then the IDF withdraws from Gaza. But then Hamas would be rebuilt. So it is my suspicion that Israel intends to occupy the whole of Gaza, no matter how long it takes, no matter what the casualties are for the IDF. Israel intends to occupy the whole of Gaza, and I believe to expel either all or most of the Palestinian inhabitants of Gaza and to replace them with Jewish settlers. Now, that would be in the interests of America and Britain. Why? Because that would strengthen Israel tremendously. Also, Palestine's offshore gas and oil fields in the Eastern Mediterranean would come under the control of Israel. And through that, it would ultimately come under the control of America and Britain. So on that basis, whilst more people in the world are aware of the murderous nature of the Israeli state vis-a-vis the Palestinian people, that does not mean the Americans and the British will loosen or end their support to Israel. Furthermore, the Israeli military, whilst it is not invincible, and it never has been invincible, is still exceedingly powerful. The war in Gaza has only been going on for approximately 3 months. And I believe that providing the Americans and the British maintain their unconditional support to Israel's actions in Gaza, then the IDF will press on, and the IDF will do whatever it takes in Gaza in order to achieve their objective, whatever that objective is. So again, on the one hand, Israel and the West is losing the information war regarding the war in Gaza. But on the other hand, that is not enough to firstly defeat Israel in Gaza, and secondly, to end the blank check which America and Britain give to Israel year in, year out. So in concluding, I would say that whilst people in the world are largely sympathetic to the Palestinians, that will not save the Palestinian people. The murder, the mass murder, the genocide of the Palestinian people will continue to go on and on and on.
But on the other hand, as what you said, Mr. Papadopoulos, specifically about the continuation of this green light that the West and the United States gives to Israel, here we're talking about 82 days of war without any achievement of the goals and the objectives that the Israeli government put in place, and we're talking about this extremist government that is headed by Netanyahu, who is in the eye of the storm. And foreign policy, it says something very interesting about the status of Israel, and we're talking about consequences of this war not only on Israel, inside of Israel, but also in Israel around the world. Our colleague Bahia, I want to hear from you. This does not only affect Israel, but also affect Biden himself. This is probably even one of the costs, that one of the expenses paid by the United States of America against Israel. And so we're talking about a cumulative process. So the withdrawal of Israel, even the defeat of Israel, will not happen in mere seconds or in a few days. Of course, the battlefield is the main indicator of anything of that sort. We see that the fronts against Israel is causing losses to Israel. So naturally, the consequences and the fruits of these operations will bear fruit and or will become clear later. So here we're talking about the lack of any, the absence of any achievement. If Israel was achieving something, then it would not have resorted to misinformation and to lie and to even fabricate false victories and to promote them on X. One day they say that they have reached a leader in Hamas. Another day they're saying that we're surrounding the house of a leader in Hamas. And so when we talk about the American street and the American administration itself, it will pay a hefty price because of his actions and the support that he provides to Israel, and because that he does not care for the genocide that is happening while the entire world stands watch. He does not even oppose, rather he tries to sabotage any kind of process to establish peace. And this is what he did in the Security Council, where he vetoed the resolution for a ceasefire. We see the term of the lack of accountability and doubt in the political leadership has spread clearly so in the Western media. We will see a few videos from the American channels that shows the doubt that the Americans are feeling. We will see CNN and Biden.
This just in, a new candid message from President Biden on Israel. At a fundraiser in Washington just a short while ago, Biden told donors that Israel is losing support around the world and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu needs to change his hardline government. CNN's Arlette Saenz joins us from the White House. Wow, these are pretty stark words from a president who has been in a robust way supportive of what the Israeli government has been doing.
Adam Abusala worked on President Biden's 2020 campaign in Battleground, Michigan.
Yeah, I was working on Arab-American engagement, getting people out to vote for Biden.
So committed that his Palestinian-American parents put Biden 2020 on his birthday cake that year. But today, as President Biden shows unwavering support for Israel in the wake of Hamas's terror attack, Abusala says he's devastated.
Right now I have family in Palestine who's afraid for their lives. And Biden is doing nothing to stop it. I'm hurt for the betrayal that we feel from Biden, but I also feel like a little bit of guilt for what I've done.
Amid a humanitarian crisis and with the civilian death toll in Gaza rising, Muslim and Arab American community leaders warned the president's re-election support in Michigan could be in jeopardy.
They said that we had to save America from Donald Trump, and now we feel that we have to save Palestine from Joe Biden.
More than 300,000 Americans from the Middle East called Michigan home, a state President Biden flipped in 2020 after Donald Trump won in 2016 by just 11,000 votes. And although not all Arab Americans are Muslim, an exit poll from the Council on American-Islamic Relations showed nearly 70% of American Muslims backed Biden.
We're predicting this could be another 2016.
Nata Al-Houthi runs the Michigan chapter of a nonprofit that studies and works to increase the political engagement of American Muslims, called Engage.
145,000 Michigan Muslims went out to vote in 2020. Biden needs the Muslim vote in order to win.
It was one that we did to get a read on the community. I have never seen in the 27 years we've been polling, my brother and I have been polling Arab Americans, we never saw a movement this dramatic over this short a period of time.
That is so cynical and can only be corroborated by an irresponsible media that has failed to show decimation of Palestinian
faces international crises in Ukraine and the Middle East, and that's to say nothing about growing problems.
I don't think you can justify what is happening in Gaza either anymore. I don't think you can do it with the arguments that the Israeli government offered in the opening days, which worked, the determination to pursue Hamas, to punish Hamas, to eradicate Hamas, but I think the impossibility of concluding that there is a rather different agenda in play, and that agenda involves quite possibly the complete destruction of that part of the world, to the point where nobody who was living there on October the 6th will be able to live there in the future.
Seems that there are many issues around Biden given what happened in this war, so we have many different examples. Specifically when we talk about the Muslim voters that Biden needs, and we also want to talk about the Western media that has double standards concerning what's happening in Gaza. And this was one of the things that we showed. Everyone is talking about the lack of credibility and lack of trust in Joe Biden and the administration, and one of the people who were hosted in the interviews where workers and staff in the Joe Biden electoral campaign, and they regret the efforts that they exerted because of what Biden is doing today, and this is what many teenagers also said. So this idea also reached the American elite, pushing for a change in the policies of the United States against Israel. And here there's a survey that Biden, the approval polls is the lowest approval rate of Joe Biden, reaching only 39%. So this puts him as one of the lowest president's approval rates. So we only increased since October from 37% approval rate to 39%. This is the 5th time that Joe Biden's approval rates dip in this year. Thomas Friedman sent a message, an invitation in this paper, saying that it is time for the United States of America to say to Israel that its goal will not be achieved. This was in the New York Times by Thomas Friedman, talking about the role of the Biden administration and what role the administration should do. He tried to give tips for how Joe Biden could handle this crisis and to urge Israel to let go of their very high objectives. And she's also talking about how the world would suffer because of Israel's war on Gaza. So these are very important, this paper is very important, and maybe there are many points when talking about this war that was that only negatively affect Israel and the United States. Allow me to go to Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos. What did Biden gain out of this unconditional and unlimited support that he gave Netanyahu and Israel and the war that Israel waged against Gaza? This war even influenced the international public opinion and the American public opinion as well. What did Joe Biden gain?
Please allow me to clarify something. Joe Biden's appalling approval ratings is on account of domestic issues, in particular the reality that America does not have a southern border, and that under Biden, hundreds of thousands of immigrants have been deliberately brought into America from the south. So his appalling approval ratings are not on account of what Israel is doing in Gaza. It is on account of domestic matters. Now, you ask about Biden and Israel. Well, I say to you this. It doesn't matter who is in the White House. It could be a Republican, it could be a Democrat, it could be Obama, it could be Bush, it could be Clinton, it could be Biden, it could be someone else. It makes no difference because America has an almighty strategic partnership with Israel. I should say the American empire or the Yankee empire has an almighty strategic partnership with Israel. Israel is the American empire's main conduit for US influence and power in the Middle East. No Israel, then there can be no American supremacy in the Middle East. So I think it is a mistake and quite naive for people to focus so much on Biden. And as we know, the American president is not truly in charge. The American ruling elite, for example, the American military-industrial complex, has far more influence over American foreign policy than the American president. So in regard to America and Israel, it all comes down to America's position in the Middle East. America gives its unconditional support to Israel because America needs a strong Israel in order to maintain American mastery in the Middle East. Now, if, of course, the American ruling elite believe that Israel simply cannot win militarily in Gaza and that the war is causing great damage to the illusion that America has built about itself, that it is the guardian of democracy, the rule of law and human rights, that is when the American ruling elite in private will tell the Israelis, enough is enough. You cannot win this war. You are harming America's reputation in the world. Therefore, you need to withdraw. And I say that notwithstanding the very serious influence that the Israel lobby has in Washington. But nonetheless, the American ruling elite, like the British ruling elite, do not care about how many Palestinian men, women, children and elderly are being murdered by the Israelis. They do not care about that. But they do care that because of what the Israelis are doing to Palestinian civilians, this is harming the damage of America and Britain in the world. So that is the only reason as to why potentially America and Britain could tell the Israelis to either withdraw from Gaza or to limit their military campaign in Gaza. It has nothing to do with the mass murder of Palestinians, because the Western ruling elites are not just pathological liars, they are psychopathic killers. So they do not care if hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are murdered or hundreds of thousands of Iraqis are murdered or hundreds of thousands of Serbs are murdered. They don't care about that, but they have to maintain the illusion of themselves in the world, the facade that they are the defenders of civilization. And as I said previously, many people in all four corners of the world are now showing support and exercising solidarity with the Palestinian people. That won't defeat Israel, but that is bad for America and Britain's reputation in the world, because many Americans and many British people are now asking, why is it that our country is allied with a murderous state?
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. These protests, and most of these protests happened in the West, and specifically we're talking about the UK and the United States. These were unprecedented protests in the history of the UK and the United States in support of the Palestinians, specifically in this war and in fighting off the Israelis. And we also saw on the political front there is a number of political figures, many petitions that were signed in the Department of State and Secretary of State in America in order to stop this infinite support for Israel. And here I want to review my colleague Bahia to continue about the lack of credibility and confidence among the people. We know definitely that the military-industrial complex that pushes the United States is the one that pushes the United States to provide such support. But when we talk about what we see on the media, we must also talk about the consequences inside America about this. Things such as the economy, education, students. All of these issues affect the surveys happening in the United States of America about the president. But according to all of these departments, all of these institutions that are conducting these surveys, there was also talk about the young in the Democratic Party, which played a pivotal role in many swing states or in many blue states, or actually many swing states that voted for Joe Biden just so that they would not vote for Donald Trump. These are the people who took the streets and they opposed the policies of the United States, the foreign policy of the United States concerning this genocide, and used the terms we talked about. And just as we said in the reports we saw all of these reports in the media recently. So this generation and these teenagers are the ones that can put pressure on the ruling elite, especially in this year, and we might see something change. And that is why we see there is much focus on a major focus on this credibility and on the lack of confidence because of October 7th. So there are many articles that were wondering whether Joe Biden is going to sacrifice his second term for the sake of the Israeli and the American interests in the Middle East. So we want to continue with showing more articles. The Wall Street Journal says that Biden puts American soldiers in danger, and the main priority of the White House is to avoid any kind of escalation with Israel. Biden says that we're using this word escalation very carefully. We don't want to have this white war, which might not be appealing for the American people. And this is specifically true because of the memory of American war in the Middle East. And because we were talking about the discredibility of the American president and institutions, but also about the collapse of trust and confidence in legacy media and mainstream media, this is very significant. Gallup publishes news.gallup.com. According to the numbers and the surveys conducted for this year, there is in the orange color. The orange color indicates the people who believe that they do not trust at all legacy and mainstream media in the United States of America. You can notice how it is always declining. It even reached its worst levels today. We see the green color, which began bit by bit and then it increased slowly, this is who people who do not trust the American media at all, and they find that social media are the suitable alternative platforms to get news from. I will move on to a second issue, and we want to shed light on the phenomenon of the more radicalized settlers called the Boys of the Hill. These are an extremist group that wants to dehumanize the Palestinians, and it was clear that the Western media did not address them and talk about them. And Bahia, this also takes us to the question why, and during this war, we heard a lot before October 7th about the role of the Boys of the Hill, and it is a group that dehumanizes Palestinians, and that is funded by the current government in Israel. We did not hear any mention of them in this battle and in this war, specifically because what is happening in the West Bank and in Gaza largely includes entering the villages and dehumanize the Palestinians. We heard after the death of a sergeant, Rasha Yehudan, and he's from the Sahara settlement, the illegal settlement. It is the most violent settlement in the West Bank. This sergeant was a member in the Hills Boys, and they burned the Hilltop Youth. And they burned the Palestinian family. We don't have time to show all of this content. I will talk about a few titles to understand this issue even more. The Washington Post addressed this movement and described them as the most radical group, and they talk about their ideology and the idea of existing in the West Bank that they believe is their right, that they should live in the West Bank according to God's promise, and they are willing to do so, to take it by force if the government does not give these lands to them. We also want to mention that one of the most important provocative material or content on social media or from Israeli settlers, the terms used come from a very specific terminology for them. So I want to tell you a post. I want to talk to you about a post. They have a specific terminology for curses and slurs when they talk about Palestinians or even the police officers whom they might see. This also shows how this violence is expressed and practiced, starting from such behaviors and ideologies. The most important post that I want to talk about, Wafa, is that in the Western media, this is what we saw, is that these groups are often separated from any official figure or the army or the government, saying that they are minorities and that they do not resemble or identify with the Israeli society. But after our research, we found that there are American organizations and groups complicit to stealing Palestinian lands and supporting colonization through funding such groups. What is even more interesting is that the ideology of these groups forces them to not use media or social media. It says that they should literally be in the hills. Ariel Sharon in 1998 coined the term for these groups, or coined the terminology used for these groups. Lately, we're seeing that there is a lot of efforts exerted in order to advertise these groups in the United States of America and to push for more funds and more donations, specifically among evangelicals. Now they have specific They have their own pages and their own websites in order to gather funds and donations. We see that all of this is only a cover for practicing such violence. This video shows the nature of their work and of their practices and behaviors. They even look differently.
אתם שומעים עלינו בעיתון, ברדיו, דרך מסכים, פוליטיקאים, אנשי תקשורת. אז נדמה לכם שיש לנו קרניים, אף ארוך, זנב וריח. או איזה ריח.
There's always an attempt to undermine what they're doing by showing two different perspectives. When interviews are done, when such interviews are done, we did a quick research using AI. We tried to ask ChatGPT about how these groups are defined, as opposed to the definition of some resistance factions' definitions. So we see that AI says that it is a loosely affiliated group. They try to use any language. They try to use a language that does not show any kind of affiliation with terrorism, for example, or racism, and that shows that Israel tried to mitigate their role. But when we ask ChatGPT, ChatGPT directly uses terrorism concerning Hamas or about Hamas. We want to go back to Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos in just 1 minute or 1.5 minutes. So how can these criminal groups be funded from an extremist government such as the right-wing government that we are seeing in Israel? What are the dangers that we can address for the Hilltop youth, and why are these groups funded by America in specific?
Well, the Israelis, ever since October the 7th, have in many ways been their worst own enemy. And I am quite bewildered as to why, since October the 7th, Israel has removed its mask, so to speak. Many of us prior to October the 7th, for many years, were well aware of the murderous nature of the Israeli state, of its hatred of the Palestinian people, including children. But the Israelis were wearing a mask before. They would deny that they kill Palestinian women and children. They would cover the murder of Palestinian women and children. But since October the 7th, as I said, that mask has come off. And the Israelis have no hesitation, they have no fear, they have no moral compunction in openly, in front of the whole of the world, murdering men, women, children and elderly. And they don't even deny it. Indeed, numerous Israeli officials have said that Israel does not bomb for accuracy. Israel bombs to destroy. And I find that quite remarkable. And I simply cannot believe that the West will be happy with this in private. And that is why I believe in private, and only in private, there will be a great amount of tension between the Western ruling elites and the Israelis, because the West must be livid at how the Israelis are murdering Palestinian civilians in front of the whole world. That is not good for the West's reputation, and quite frankly, it's not good for Israel's reputation. So I find it quite bewildering how the Israelis have taken off the mask.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, the expert in foreign affairs. You were with us from London. I also thank you, my colleague.